What's going on, guys? F1 is back after another week off. It's the beginning of a new triple header, and it all kicks off this weekend, 2025 Imola Grand Prix. We're here to make our predictions for what we think is going to happen this weekend in Italy, and I, for one, am super excited. Imola is one of my more favorite, tracks on the F1 calendar. I know at this point in its history, it's not the most conducive for great racing, but it's very technical, it's tight, you have to be inch perfect basically the entire way around, and really it just shows that the driver makes the results. Qualifying is going to be extremely important, and keeping your nose clean almost more than anything in the Grand Prix itself. But without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get our show on the road with our predictions for the Imola Grand Prix this weekend. We're going to talk our biggest positive surprise, our biggest disappointment, our qualifying top three, our race podium, and as always, we will round it out with our one crazy prediction right at the end. I hope you are ready just as much as I am. Let's go ahead, kick things off with our biggest positive surprise. For biggest positive surprise this weekend, we're not going to beat around the bush too much. I am going with Carlos Sainz this weekend. I think we've seen Carlos really start to gel a bit more with the Williams over these last few weeks. And at the same time, though, it can't help but feel like it's a little underwhelming seeing the results that his teammate Alex Albon has been putting in to begin this season. And I think this weekend could line up very nicely for Carlos's welcome to 2025 in the Williams. And I think we may see the first weekend where we really see Carlos get on top of the car and potentially just really show what he is made of in that Williams. I know we don't always see drivers really gel with the new car, switching teams, all of that, and so it really isn't too surprising to see Carlos take a few race weekends to get himself back up to speed a little bit with the Williams. But we have seen that Williams is fighting towards the front end of the grid at this point. No, they're not necessarily fighting for race wins, but I mean, Alex Albon is putting in consistent top 5, top 6 finishes in these Grand Prix, and so it's definitely proving itself to be a car that can really challenge up towards the front, potentially also even fighting Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship itself. So I think we see Carlos beat Alex this weekend in the race and really put himself on the map once again with maybe a top 5 or 6 finish in the Grand Prix. What do you think? All right, let's move on along to our biggest disappointment for the weekend, and it pains me to say it, but I am going with Yuki Tsunoda this weekend. I think Yuki has found himself in a bit of a no man's land over the last couple of race weekends. We saw him perform very decently as soon as he jumped into the Red Bull, but I think we've sort of found himself sort of just hovering around, the lower end of the top 10, and really seems like he's still struggling to truly get up to speed in the Red Bull, which isn't necessarily his fault. This has provedly been, a very difficult car to drive, not only from himself. We saw with Liam Lawson and Sergio Perez last season, and so I don't think it's too surprising to see Yuki struggling like we are, but at the same time, I know for a fact that he's really wanting to get the most out of this chance he has in the parent team, in the Red Bull seat. And so I think after a week off, coming off of another back-to-back, which we saw Yuki kind of struggle a little bit from time to time and not really be able to make too much of an impression one way or another, I think we could see a potential weekend where Yuki might just press just a little bit too much, trying to get even more out of the car. And I think we might see a situation at a track like Imola, like at Saudi, where the margins can be very small. And I think we could see Yuki just push past the limits just a little bit too much. And I think this could be a weekend where we see Yuki struggle a little bit, and it could be very disappointing to see, because I think I can speak for all of us when I say that we really want to see him do well. So unfortunately, Yuki, I'm sorry to say, but you are my pick for biggest disappointment this weekend in Imola. Let's quickly roll on into our qualifying top 3. We'll begin in P3. We'll go with Oscar Piastri in this one. Now, I know that Oscar is coming off of, 3 or 4 race wins in a row at this point. It's hard to keep track considering we're only on round 7 of this season. But I will say, out of everything that Oscar has done this season, I think his qualifying has been the thing to let him down the most so far. We see him, even last time out in Miami, start outside the top 3 while he did end up taking the win, I think his qualifying pace definitely does need to improve a little bit more, because he's not going to get lucky like he is all the time and be able to make his way up into the lead like we saw at Miami. And so I think this is going to be better performance from him, but I think ultimately, of all the things that Oscar has going for him right now, his qualifying is sort of his weakest spot. And so I think he'll still be good enough for top 3, but I don't know if he'll necessarily be challenging for pole quite like we expect him to or really want to see him start doing. But time will tell. We'll see how it goes. As we move on now to P2, I am going with the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. Max has been performing very, very well. We saw it last time out in Miami, very similar, opposite end of the spectrum to Oscar. We saw Max end up taking pole position in this one before ultimately falling back into the pack and kind of just falling out away from it, having the Red Bull kind of fall away from him as time went on. But at the same time, in qualifying trim, that Red Bull is mighty quick, and we've seen that the McLaren is very, very strong, but not necessarily over that single lap pace, and Max has shown that he's able to take advantage of it and qualify very well. I think it's going to be a front row start for Max, but not enough for pole position. It'll be interesting to see what Red Bull does going forward, especially with some of the rumors that have been floating around with Red Bull. We're not going to touch on it yet just because there's really no verifiable source at this point, but at the same time, it's hard to ignore, and it'll be very interesting to see what Red Bull has going on this weekend. As we move on now to pole position, in this one, I think is truly just going to be it's about time, or we're really going to have to start rethinking things going forward. I have gone with Lando Norris for pole position this weekend in Imola. I think it's about time we really see Lando lock in and see what his mental fortitude really looks like. I think a track like Imola sort of sets up very well for him. It's going to be tight, it's going to be technical, and Lando is going to, if he's going to come in and as focused as he needs to be to truly challenge for the championship, he needs to put it on pole position this weekend, get another solid, good result, not a disappointing result, but a solid, good result on the cards. And I think it's going to start on Saturday in qualifying. But like I said, I think another thing, Lando we know has pace, but can he have the consistent pace and put the lap in when it matters the most? Time will tell. I think he's going to get it done this weekend. But again, there's always that what if, that little bit of doubt creeping in the back of your mind every single time. So we'll see what happens. But there you have it, guys. My qualifying top 3, a Lando Norris pole, Max Verstappen P2, and Oscar Piastri P3. All right, moving along, race podium, the reason we go racing on Sundays, who's going to come away with the win in Italy this time out, and why is it definitely not going to be Ferrari? Spoiler alert. But we'll kick things off in P3, and I am going with George Russell. Talk about a driver who is just kind of, whether or not you want to think of it this way, slid under the radar while also consistently bagging really, really good finishes. It's just George just always seems to find himself right around P3, and just that Mercedes looks good enough this year to really challenge for podiums. Definitely doesn't seem like it's good enough to challenge for race wins, but it definitely looks consistent enough on a week-to-week basis to see George really challenging for podiums. We've seen him pull out podiums a lot to start the season, and I think it's going to continue this weekend around Imola because, man, it just seems like the thing George does, he starts in the upper top 5 and then finishes on the podium. What can you expect of me? Where I'm battling the probabilities here at this point. So George, congratulations, a podium for me in my predictions. Don't let me down. As we move on now to P2 in this one, I'm going with Oscar Piastri. Obviously, I think Oscar in the fastest car should move up pretty easily in this one. I think in terms of race pace, McLaren are miles and miles and miles ahead of the rest of the field. I definitely see this being a very comfortable P2 for McLaren. And I'll go ahead and spoiler alert it because I'll combine this with my pick for P1. My winner of the Imola Grand Prix is Lando Norris. It just really feels like McLaren are on an entirely different level in terms of race pace. If Lando is able to get a good, start to the race, I think he'll be able to drive away from Max. If he lets Max play those mind games that he always seems to do, I think this could get a little more interesting. But at the same time, I'm sure Lando would be no more focused than anything else in history than just going into turn 1 in the lead and using that clear air and McLaren's race pace to drive off from Max. and open the door for Oscar to then take P2 in the end. So if Lando gets a good start on Sunday and is able to hold on to P1, I think that's going to be basically it for this weekend, unless something crazy happens weather-wise, or maybe an incident or a poorly timed safety car for someone else. It's just going to be what it's going to be. But if I look at it purely just from what's probably going to happen in terms of green flag racing all the way through, I think Lando gets a good start and holds off Max. I think it bodes very well for a race win for him. And Oscar, if Lando is able to drive away with the clear air, should have no problem getting past Max over the course of the entire race distance. So there it is. It's a McLaren 1-2 once again with a George Russell sprinkling in a P3. Daring, I know. We're getting really bold on the channel this week. And it just feels like it's going to be one of those weekends. I know we're all really excited for Imola. It's one of these, sort of historic races on the calendar in terms of the history that we've had there. And it just feels like it's going to be another one of those where we'll leave it going, I kind of expected more. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comment section below. Last but not least, our one crazy prediction this weekend, and we are going to the French outfit of Alpine. For my one crazy prediction is that Franco Colapinto, who is of course in the car for the first time after Jack Doohan was unceremoniously dropped following the Miami Grand Prix weekend, is now on a 5-race contract for Alpine in the car, and I think we're gonna see a very similar trajectory to what we saw with Franco last season in the Williams. I think we're going to see him come out absolutely firing in all cylinders. I'm sure he's going to be itching to get back in the car and show off what he can do, and I think it's going to come true for him this weekend, because my one crazy prediction is that Franco Colapinto finishes ahead of Pierre Gasly this weekend. Pierre has looked very, very solid over the beginning and part of this season, and it just seems like one of those situations where Franco is going to want to come in, light a fire under the team, or himself even, and really try and put in a very solid result. He's going to be very, very focused. Of course, he hasn't driven at Imola in a while, but I don't think that's going to stop him. It just feels like one of those drivers that can jump into a track and really get going from the jump, and I think we see it this weekend. I think Franco Colapinto finishes ahead of Pierre Gasly this weekend. Guys, there we have it. My predictions for the 2025 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix here in Italy is going to be a lot of fun. Triple headers are going to be very interesting. Also, just the fun of the qualifying in midfield and lower midfield racing this year has been fantastic, and I for one can't wait to see what's going to happen this weekend. I hope you're all excited as well. We'll be back after the weekend is over to talk about everything that we saw happen with our quick hits, race weekend winners and losers, and then we'll go over these exact predictions we just made. I, for one, cannot wait. I think I cooked up some pretty solid predictions, but what do you think? Who do you have winning the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix this weekend? Let me know down in the comment section below, and if you made it this far, leave a like on the video. It really helps me out. And as always, if you haven't already, subscribe down below because it really helps me out. I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll be back after the weekend is over, and until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.